All right, wonderful. Well, thank you for joining this episode of Titus Talent Talks. I'm here with Ben White from Titus Talent. Today, we're talking about quarterly conversations.
Yeah, it's a really important topic. So I'm excited that we actually got to jump in and discuss this one. I just think it's so important, as a leader to have that conversation, have that dialogue, and create that space.
Mm-hmm.
I'm going to start by asking you a question, Matt.
Yeah.
So why quarterly, right? And so many companies do this yearly. Quarterly is so much more than once a year. I mean, 4 times a year is a ton. Why?
That's a great question. And honestly, I think when I started with Titus, this is the first time I've really experienced what it is to have quarterly conversations. And it's been probably one of the most helpful things, certainly in knowing where I'm at and knowing what my expectations are, the kind of what's required of me, what my manager's thinking. I think quarterly is so important for me because, well, I think in general, just because you have a consistency of touch points along the way. You imagine I like to think of it like this. If you only took your car in for an oil change maybe once a year, or you had something that, if you didn't address it on a regular basis, then you don't see what's good, you don't see what problems might be occurring along the way. So having something that's set in quarterly versus annually, it just provides those multiple touch points and keeps the conversation flowing, so to speak. So yeah.
Real quick point here. You said oil changes quarterly. Are you supposed to do your oil changes once a year? Is that frowned upon?
I don't know.
Is that what you're saying, or is that just an example?
That's just an example. Maybe that's kind of coming back to some of my college days of that piece of advice that I got. Car runs on 3 fuels: oil, gas, and water.
Yeah.
Oh yeah, got to change the oil out and that thing, which reminds me, I've actually got to do that on the tubes pretty shortly here. But
I really like what you said there, though. I mean, it is so important to check in. I mean, imagine there was an issue that you were running into in Q1 or Q2, and you go, you know what? We'll talk about it a little bit, but from a performance standpoint, I'll wait till December to address it. It just seems irresponsible to me, almost.
Oh, absolutely. I think you're spot on. So, I mean, within these conversations, what are the kind of things that you love to discuss quarterly? And is it the same things every time? Is that not overkill maybe compared to talking about it once a year? Talk me through that a little bit.
Yeah, I think it's a balance. And I think the balance is important because there needs to be some things that you talk about every single quarter. I think that consistency is part of the benefit of having it quarterly, that you're going through and you're talking about different performance objectives on a quarterly basis and you're discussing them and it's consistent. Yeah. And there's the clarity there. Everyone knows what to expect. But I think it's important to put other things into that conversation, to keep them fresh and, to keep them from feeling redundant, right? Mm-hmm. So maybe you want to talk about goals for the year early on. Maybe you want to talk about, how someone is growing and developing, things they're doing to kind of increase their capabilities midway through the year.
That's a great point.
So for me, I think it's a mix and I think it's a balance. I think there are things you need to talk about every single time. But I also think it makes sense to bring some variety to these conversations to keep them fresh and to talk about, how people are doing and how they're feeling and how they're progressing. And that's another benefit to doing it, more frequently. I think it's important, as a manager, I want to know how people are feeling and how the year is progressing for them. Are they advancing like they had hoped? Are they being exposed to opportunity? And those conversations can change depending on what was said in the last one. You can check up on those goals, check up on those, kind of benchmarks. Are you doing new and different things that you would hope to do? So yeah, I would say it's a mix there.
Yeah, absolutely. I love kind of what you're bringing to the table. Of what I'm hearing you say is it's not just about the business, but it's about the person as well. Kind of finding out where they need to be or where they want to be, maybe outside of the remit of their role or what's required of them, but also on a personal level as well. How are you doing? What are maybe some of the great things in life? What are some of the things that you might be struggling right now? How does that play into and impact your working life and the relationships that you have with your colleagues. So I love what you're bringing to the table, and looking at what I'm hearing you say is kind of a more holistic approach to the conversations and even the reviews.
Yeah. I think it's important. It's the way I always view it is that you only get to have that conversation. In some organization, it's once a year. So that's a critical conversation. But even quarterly, it's, people wait 3 months for that. It's a big opportunity. So you want to make sure you come prepared, you cover a wealth of topics, and people leave feeling heard and motivated to succeed in the next 3 months. I think that's important. To me.
Absolutely.
One of the things I was hoping to ask you is just about the environment, right? How I think it's critical to invite, to create this environment where people feel they can say how they really feel, that there is an open and honest dialogue occurring during these. What do you think is kind of the key to making sure that happens?
Yeah, again, I think that's a really great question. I think it's something that certainly, even kind of in our business relationship, with you being my kind of direct manager and me being, reporting directly to you, you do a really good job of setting a strong environment to be able to have that. And I think that it goes beyond the quarterly conversation. I think it's something that is fostered within the team environment that you have. I mean, the weekly touch points that we would have with one-on-ones, for example, are building blocks that feed into the quarterly conversations that we have. So it's not like you just step into, I haven't seen Ben for 3 months and now I'm stepping into a conversation with him, and there's this wealth of stuff to talk about. No, I think a key to a good environment is the relationship and the relational aspect of what you're fostering within your teams on a regular basis.
Man, that's so good, Matt. That's so important. Like, because if you don't create that environment outside of a quarterly conversation, and then you walk into it going, all right, we're gonna have a super open and transparent conversation, you're missing the boat. You're starting too late. I love that. That's a great point.
Yeah, I mean, it's phenomenal to have that, to be in an organization that kind of outworks that people first mentality. What does that really mean? Well, if you've got kind of people, partners, and profits, and the way that we operate in that, well, you need to know your people, and you need to create an environment for your people to do their best work. And we do that certainly within our roles as consultants and those working in the talent field. One of my favorite questions always is, okay, what environment do you thrive in? And what environment do you feel hinders your best production, or hinders your productivity? So having a manager who can have that and foster that environment is absolutely key. And then it just leads into a smoother and, I think, just more productive quarterly conversation as well, because then you can reference back to, well, 2 weeks ago we spoke about this, 3 weeks ago we spoke about this, last month these were your goals, how are you doing? I've seen this happen kind of along the way. And I guess my question within all of this, Ben, is, we've enjoyed some great conversations with that, but do you have a format that you use for these conversations, kind of an outline that you follow that maybe helps you stay on track, helps us really get the best out of these conversations?
Yeah. Well, you and I are both Mavericks. Our PI profiles are Mavericks. So I think we need to have an outline. If we don't have an outline, I think we could get sidetracked real quick. So I do. And I think it's important because and I don't want to overuse this phrase, but I think it's a balance, because in some ways you want to make everybody's conversation their own, right? Because everybody has different goals. Everybody has different motivators. Everybody has different objectives. But at the same time, you want everybody to have a relatively similar experience. That's the balance. You want to make it unique to the person so that there's a benefit to them and they're feeling seen and heard, and they have a plan that is specific to them. But you also need that consistency, right? If you spend an hour with one person talking through what they've done in the quarter, what their goals are, how they're feeling, how they feel about the organization, and then you spend like 17 minutes with somebody else because you have a different format, gosh, that just seems so like wildly inappropriate to me. That doesn't seem fair. It doesn't seem equitable. So I think it's important to find that balance. You definitely need that outline to follow. You need to make sure you're measuring everybody fairly, making sure that it's an equitable experience. But then you also need to find that space where you can make it about them and about their growth and about what they're trying to accomplish.
Yeah, and I think, I mean, hearing you say that, it sounds like as an organization or a company, you really need to know kind of what you're about, what your goals are, what your mission statement is. I mean, how does that feed into the quarterly conversation, and what reference points do you have along the way that enable the person to be heard, but also to tie that into the larger direction, framework, vision, traction of the organization?
Yeah, this is another question. I think it's that's so important. And we have a culture, and we have a culture that we actually live. So we have lived values, and that's a way that we're able to kind of follow, follow a script, follow kind of this guideline, a skeleton, if you will, and then relate it back to the business, relate it back to our goals. And I think that is something I found incredibly helpful.
Mm-hmm.
Because when you measure people, you want to make sure that what you're measuring is helping you achieve your objectives. And having lived values, having, these things that are, that we all have to kind of adhere to and follow and guide us in our daily decision making, I think they're really important. And so tying that into quarterly conversations, tying it into any sort of review, are you meeting the objectives from a cultural standpoint? I think it's really important.
Yeah, absolutely. I think you're spot on with that too. And certainly from an employee standpoint, it stops me from going rogue. Certainly
Yeah.
as a maverick, it kind of keeps me on track with some of those areas as well.
Yeah,
So
me
yeah.
too. What about drawbacks? Because there are people watching this or listening to this, and maybe their organization does it once a year. And I have to imagine some of them feel okay about that. Some of them
Mhm.
probably feel like, no, this is good. We do it once a year, we get it done, we move on. Do you see drawbacks to doing it so often?
I mean, that's again a great question. Personally, I think if I really were to analyze it, drawbacks would probably be more on the, how large is your team? What ability do you have to do this on a quarterly basis? Are you running a team of 50 individuals? And then suddenly, if that's coming round, does that impact what you have to do?
Yeah.
Let's say you're running a sales team, for example, and you're VP of sales, and you've got 20, 30 people, 40 people that you're overseeing. Suddenly, having 20, 30 hours every quarter given over to each of those individuals can take up a lot of time. So I could see maybe in organizations where the structure is set up like that, that could be a drawback. But then
Yeah.
conversely, on the other side, I would probably ask, well, what are you doing to help grow other individuals in your team that could help share the load
Yeah.
within that? How do you, what's impacting your culture in that way? And then is there maybe other discussions that you could have around retention issues or employee engagement? That's a conversation for another day.
Yeah.
But yeah, I think drawbacks on it, I think, are really minimal, because really you're keeping conversation open, you're keeping
Yeah.
it alive, and you're keeping it flowing. So aside from team sizes, I mean, I can't think of anything else. I mean, anything that kind of comes to
Yeah.
mind for you with drawbacks
Yeah.
or
It's
from a
funny
management perspective?
when you said team size and you gave the example of 50, I immediately did some math. I'm like, okay, 1 hour times 4, that's 200. There's 2,080 workable hours in a year. That's a tenth of your time. Like, if you
A
truly
lot of
have 50
time.
people, oh, it's an incredible investment. And I don't think there's any more appropriate investment than in your people. I think that's the best place to invest when you're going to invest. My thing about, if you had 50 people, how much do you really know about their performance? How dialed in to their day-to-day are you? Um, you know, I, you know, I don't think you can truly be dialed in if you have more than 10. If you go north of 10 people, I think you're going to have a really, really challenging time truly knowing how they're doing, where they need to grow, where they need to develop, and then how you can contribute to that. At 50, it feels like you'd just be checking some boxes. It would be really
Yeah.
transactional and a lot less personal. And I don't think that's how you lead people personally.
No, I like you say, not transactional. A lot,
Yeah.
kind of. That's a difficult kind of field to
Yeah.
grow relationships in. I mean, just kind of one question here, and this may be kind of relating back to some of our conversations.
Yeah.
Where have been some of your favorite places for these conversations to take place? Is it just, okay, you got the office, we have that environment, or do you kind of look to go beyond that? What are maybe, this might be an environmental thing, but what environments do you feel pull out the best conversations within working with people on your team?
Yeah, for me, I think there is a really strong correlation between how delicious the food is and how productive the conversation's going to be.
Speak to me.
Yeah, I don't know how many of these you and I have had at this point, but I think we're probably around, I don't know, 7 or 8, something like that. And once we went to Bel Air, and that was really good. Had some good tacos, some chips and salsa, and then Cafe India, which was
that was near and dear to my heart. Oh,
yeah, some delicious Indian food. And I say that kind of in jest. It's kind of joking.
Did you kind of say,
because I really do love delicious food. But I think it's just, for me, it's any place you can really be focused, right? You can make that person your priority. When you sit down with your team, whether it's for a one-on-one, but even more so quarterly, because people do not get the chance to have that type of discussion that frequently, you need to make sure it's a place where you can put 100% of your attention on them.
Absolutely.
They need to feel seen. They need to feel heard. You need to cover the topics they want to cover. You need to cover the topics that you need to cover. So I think it's any place where you can really be dialed in and have that productive conversation. Bonus points if you can have some tofu tikka masala.
Oh gosh.
And some naan. That's how I'd answer that question.
I'll take that chicken tikka korma with PR rice. I just got stuck on something you said a minute ago and just heard the pun in it of ingest. Like, ingest food? Is this all related? What's going on with that? But everything else you had to say was really important, and we can certainly talk about that in our quarterly conversations as well. But I think from an employee standpoint, I love the kind of the way that we do things here. I think we split it out two quarters we're in the office, 2 quarters we're going out somewhere to eat. And for me, having those conversations over food, it just opens something up. It livens up that conversation. It's not heavy at that point. Even some of the discussions are maybe a little more difficult, or okay, there's some areas that we're looking at performance issues and we need to raise this up a little bit. When you have that over a taco, it just makes everything that little bit sweeter.
Yeah, absolutely. And it kind of reminds me of something you said earlier, like, how do you keep it fresh? How do you keep them from being redundant and stale? And I think part of it is that cadence of alternating location. It seems like a little thing, but if you're doing it in the office one time, and then the next quarter you go out and you grab a bite to eat, it's different. It adds a little bit of variability in there. And I think that's good. I think it's good.
And it gives you something to look forward to as well.
Yeah.
I know when that kind of flashes up in my calendar, like, cool, I'm going out for lunch right now. I'm hanging out with them. This is going to be a great conversation. We're going to cover some really good topics. Now I get to kind of hear his perspective on where things are at, where the direction the company's going on. And, I can share some of my thoughts and kind of dreams, perspectives, goals, things that, maybe, hey, these are a little bit struggles right now. What would you suggest in this? What would you advise? And you get to have that back and forth, which is just so important. And I just don't think you'd find that in an annual review. And even kind of the annual review, to me, sometimes that just sounds ominous. Quarterly conversation is just, it's that much lighter. That's that much more, hey, we're in this together. I'm not coming in to just lord something over that. We're on the same team here. And I think that's hugely important, even from a subconscious perspective of why do we call it quarterly conversations? Why not review? Why not, that kind of thing.
Yeah, I mean, you're right. And the connotation that it has is so important too, because it shouldn't be something bad. You shouldn't dread an annual review. You should look forward to a chance to fairly evaluate how things are going. And it shouldn't be a negative. And I would just be horrified, honestly, if I felt like I was doing these reviews and people felt like, oh gosh, I have to go have this. This is going to be terrible. I can't wait till it's over. My conversation or my quarterly or my annual review is Tuesday. I can't wait till it's Wednesday. I wish I could fast forward. That'd just be so terrible to me. They really should be something that people look forward to. You don't get to do them that often. And they're important. And I do think the optics of it, and you make a great point, Matt. And it does. Yearly review sounds ominous. That's like, you're nervous about that. A quarterly conversation you can look forward to. And I think that's really how it should be.
Absolutely. I mean, before we wrap up here, what would be, if you kind of, one of your favorite questions to ask within a quarterly conversation? What do you walk away from those conversations? Or certainly when you step into it, what are you hoping to achieve? And when you walk away, how are you hoping to feel, and what are you hoping to have gained from that conversation?
Yeah. You know, the thing I always hope I achieve when I go into one of those is I just want to feel like we're on the same page. You know, that's one of the first things. I don't want anything to be a surprise. You know, as a leader, I hope I'm being honest the entirety of the quarter. So when we go into that meeting, there should be no surprises. Everybody should be like, yeah, no, I agree. And we're on the same page. And then I want to know, I want to know what I need to do to make the next 3 months a motivating environment for that person. You know, what do they want? What can I do to position them for success and motivate them to go out and get that success? And to answer the question about what's one of my favorite questions to ask, I always love asking, okay, what do you need to accomplish so that when you and I are sitting here 3 months from now, the quarter was a success in your eyes? That I love asking, because I like finding out what people's goals are. And just, to me, it really opens it up.
Absolutely. And I think that's certainly, from an employee perspective, that's a huge win for me, hearing that, because I feel seen, heard, and understood. Yeah. And that gives me the impetus then, okay, I know where I'm heading over the next 3 months. And this last 3 months are behind us now. We can't go back, we can't change this, but we can move forward. And I know in the next 3 months, there's going to be some adjustments that take place, but I'm not going to have to wait a year to figure that out. I'm not going to have to wait a year to go like, oh, cool, well, the last year, well, it was kind of last year for you was kind of a wash. It's like, no, I don't want that. I want just,
yeah. What about February? I rocked February. Don't you remember that? Yeah.
Yeah.
No.
Oh, great. Yeah.
For sure.
Well,
for sure.
I think this has been wonderful. And I really appreciate your perspectives on all of these things. And I think we're probably due. Are we due a quarterly conversation anytime soon? Or,
coming up, I think within a month, we'll have some. So yeah, it's there. And likewise, I always, I appreciate your perspective, and I think you've had some great quarterly conversations. But it's nice to hear your perspective on it too, right? I feel like this has been, for me, like, maybe I need to talk with everyone. How do you feel the quarterly conversation is? So it's just been nice from that perspective for me. For all you joining and watching or listening, thanks for joining us. Stay tuned for more. We've got more conversations like this coming up. Have a great day.
All right. Thank you. Thanks, Ben.